This is going to be really insightful for you if you have experienced any symptoms and you either don't know how to diagnose them, you've been living in a state of exhaustion, fatigue, feeling tired when you wake up throughout the day. And most of us have either settled and just kind of accepted that this is the state of how we are, and we haven't really gone into a deep dive of asking the questions, why am I tired? And realizing that this is actually not normal. I'm bloating again, digestive issues, fatigue. I have really bad brain fog. The Kambo effectively eliminated 70 to 80% of the mycotoxins from my system. One of the mycotoxins was 100% eliminated. I'm feeling great and everything is fine. Or so I thought. Welcome back to the Modern Advice podcast. Today, we're going to be diving into my insane health journey over the last 7 months. This is going to be really insightful for you if you have experienced any symptoms and you either don't know how to diagnose them, have considered that maybe this is all just normal for you, and you've been living in a state of exhaustion, fatigue, feeling tired when you wake up throughout the day, powering through the day with your coffees, or maybe you're someone that's already into the biohacking and wellness trends of cold plunging and doing all of the things to try and create more energy. Something that comes up frequently with my community online is how to create more energy. People are often commenting about how they are exhausted, fatigued, they don't have the energy to get through life. You know, they're powered by caffeine, or they just don't actually move at the rate that they want to be moving at. They're not productive. They don't know how to produce. They don't know how to build and create, and they're not quite sure. And most of us have either settled and just kind of accepted that this is the state of how we are, and we haven't really gone into a deep dive of asking the questions, why am I tired? And realizing that this is actually not normal. So get ready, pull up a chair. This is going to be a really powerful episode. I'm really looking forward to sharing all of the wisdom and nuggets that I have in this for you. So this begins in September of 2023. I had just flown into LA after a summer in Europe, and usually after a long distance flight like that, I would be a little bit jet lagged for a couple days. I would give myself about a week to adjust to the new time zone, get back to normal without pushing myself too hard. I have protocols that I follow to adjust to the new time zone. So like I'll make sure that I get out first thing in the morning, and I'll follow like the Andrew Huberman sort of morning sunlight protocol, right? Try and get out first thing in the morning, sunlight in the eyes, electrolytes or salt, like Himalayan salt, lemon in water, and get charged for the day. Maybe meditate a little bit before I get on my phone or do anything work related, and try and wait an hour before I have any kind of caffeine in my system. So I was doing that, grounding, taking walks on the beach, barefoot. I was exercising. I got back into my biohacking protocols of doing the red light therapy and doing the cold exposure. After a week had passed, I was still very fatigued. I was sleeping well, but I was fatigued to a point where I was questioning why. I was like, this isn't normal. And my diet is pretty good. I'm sleeping really well and I'm sleeping a lot. So jet lag really shouldn't last this long. This is strange. Why am I tired? I had a 3-month stint in LA planned to bunker down and work on my nonfiction book that I've been writing. So it was very imperative that I was very productive. I had this sort of time limit to try and get my manuscript out in 90 days. Very ambitious, even for me. And I was like, okay, well, it's got to get moving on this. So let's get going. Let's try and figure out why we're so tired. And so then I start testing for different things, right? And this is something that I regularly do, is I will start looking to try and figure out what it is that's going on. Why am I experiencing this kind of symptomology, or why am I in this pattern of behavior? Why am I experiencing this set of circumstances? And I'll be eliminating things one by one to try and figure out what is the root cause of this. And so To try and find the root cause of my fatigue, I initially started with diet and made sure that I was cutting out any kind of processed foods, sugars, breads. Diet was good. And I was like, okay, I'm still tired. And I was like, okay, it's got to be exercise. And so then I started exercising a lot more, making sure that I was sweating, make sure that I was just getting enough exercise in, because that will obviously energize you. Was doing that, still tired. And I was like, okay, that's really weird. I'm taking my supplements. I'm doing my cold and my morning sunlight. And so I'm like, yeah, why am I still tired? I have a conversation with my housemate at the time, Juliana, and she says, you need to go and see my chiropractor on Abbot Kinney. He's super holistic. I know how much you're into all of the weird health things. He does muscle testing, kinesiology. You'll absolutely love him. Like, he'll muscle test you and he'll figure out maybe what else is going on. So I go and see Dr. Patrick on Abbot Kinney, and he's great. We hit it off. He's really funny. Very quirky, into the alternative medicines, which I'm all about, and you'll get to know that throughout the show. So he tests me for a couple of different things, and he says, well, you have a sensitivity to gluten and corn. And he's like, you are beyond sensitivity. He was like, you were actually intolerant. Like, you can't have these things. You need to cut them out immediately. This is really bad. It's causing bloating and indigestion in your system. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, gluten makes sense. Most of us really shouldn't be eating gluten anyway, but corn, and I'm sort of having this existential moment where I'm thinking, like, am I ever going to be able to go to Mexico again? What are they, corn tortillas, like tacos or any kind of Mexican food? It's made from corn, right? And I'm just having this grieving moment of like, oh my God, the foods, all of the foods. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess this is a good thing because I'll be able to clean up my diet to a next level. And I'm like, all right, well, okay. So then I cut out gluten and corn, which I'd already eliminated quite a bit of, but corn was a very unexpected one. So I'm thinking, all right. And this is how most of us look at our health. We look at the symptomology, we look at the diet, and we think that it's as simple and as straightforward as just diet. Okay, I'm allergic to this thing, or I'm intolerant to this thing, and it's causing sensitivities and issues. But what we'll later find out and discover is that your body should be able to handle anything. And it is never like a permanent thing. Obviously, there are nuances here, and this is definitely not medical advice, but like if you don't have celiac disease and you don't have like really formally diagnosed conditions and you just have like sudden sensitivities, what you want to look at is the state of your overall microbiome, the state of your overall biological terrain, and realize that this is something that is actually always in flux. It's not that you're born with this like inability to have a certain food. Like, this is something that develops over time. Otherwise, why wasn't I always allergic to gluten and corn? How did this just pop up now? And I can tell you that I've done allergen tests in the past where I have been testing positive for certain allergens. And I can tell you that after changing certain things in my environment, changing certain things in my emotional self, that those allergens dissipated over time. Like, I used to be very allergic to cat hair, and then I did some things, which we can talk about later. And all of a sudden, now I'm no longer allergic to cat hair. So I want you to just be open-minded to the possibility that medicine is a very complex field, and obviously, again, not medical advice, but that nothing is black and white and nothing is permanent necessarily. So I'm just going to be sharing my own experience, and what I would encourage you to do is investigate your experience rather than taking anything that I'm saying as direct truth or gospel for you, because you have your own biome, you have your own terrain, you have your own set of environments and symptomology and your own psychosomatic self. And that's going to be slightly different from mine. So let my story just be an example, and know that you still have to take responsibility for your own search and investigation. So I cut out the gluten and the corn, and I'm feeling a little bit better after a week, and then I just decline again. So I'm bloating again, I'm having digestive issues again, and I'm still incredibly chronically fatigued. My brain capacity is really rapidly declining. I have really bad brain fog when I'm kind of thinking I'm really struggling to work. You know, I'm struggling to write, I'm struggling to read, I'm struggling to research, I'm struggling to stay focused for more than maybe 2 or 3 hours. This is really unlike me. Usually I can get a good 5 to 6 hours in a day of high focus. And this is strange. So I keep testing things and I'm thinking maybe it's even the astrological weather. I'm kind of messaging my astrologer and asking her about transits. I'm like waiting for certain transits to pass, thinking maybe it's just the weather, you know. And once everything passes and I still have all of my symptoms and all of my feelings, I'm like, okay, I really don't know what this is. Now I go away for the weekend, and when I come back, my housemate says, I've gotten the place tested for mold. And the report came back positive 50 times the normal toxicity levels. We have 8 areas in the house with a high density of toxic mold. All of a sudden, it makes sense. Now, I didn't know much about mold at this point, but I'm like, I know enough to know that's definitely causing these issues, right? Like, that's got to be it. This is great. Finally, we have an answer. We understand what's really going on. So then I start to do all of my research into mold, and I start looking into how serious is this? What does this mean? How do we get rid of it? What do we do? How do we detox it? And I didn't personally know many people in my life that had mold or recovered from it. I always glossed over it as something that was maybe exaggerated a little bit. And I think until you go through it, you don't realize how drastic it can be and how much it can rob you of your life. So I'm like, okay, well, what do we do now? And the first thing that we did was, after we got the test results, we needed to contact a remediation company. So the first thing you want to do is get your house tested for mold. If you have these symptoms, get your house tested. And you want to just do a little Google mold testing in my area. Obviously, you know, you can get a few different companies in. Remediation is the process of getting a quote for how much it would cost to remove the mold from the house. So depending on where it is, for us, it was underneath floorboards. It was underneath our basins in our bathrooms. It was very hidden. It wasn't obvious. It wasn't on the walls. But essentially you have a kind of exterminator sort of company process where they come in, they barricade the house, they gas it with these chemicals that get rid of the mold. And during that process, you can't be in the house, right? It's highly toxic chemicals. So you need to leave the premises for several days or a week, and you need to find somewhere else to live, which, depending on where you are in the world, that might be difficult. And depending on the laws in your state, country, this may or may not be covered by your rental clause or by the government or by your homeowner insurance. So this can be an expensive process. It can add up, which is really unfortunate. So hopefully it is covered for you wherever you are. And if you're in the state of California, technically the landlord should be paying for all of this. So there's a little helpful tip for you. But Google the laws, make sure that you research all of this yourself, and try and hopefully not get too much of this out of pocket for you. It took us about a month to get someone in, because a lot of these remediation companies were booked out, and then to also find alternative accommodation for us to live in. So once we found out, for an extra month, we were just waiting, which was very uncomfortable because you know what's going on and you just continue declining. So in the second month for me, I got so bad to the point where I stopped working altogether. So I had to take a sabbatical. I was planning to take one anyway because I wanted to focus on my book writing process. So my sabbatical was supposed to be a creative sabbatical, which I was really excited about. I was looking forward to it all year. I was like, oh my God, I'm saving up so that I can take a creative sabbatical to work on my books and be the writer that I've always wanted to be. And my sabbatical ends up being this unexpected healing and recovery journey, which I'm still on. So that was a fun little surprise. When I took the sabbatical, I did it because I had to. And I had to put my programs on pause. I had to put all marketing on halt, kind of delegate certain things to my team. and just really do the absolute minimum because of what I was capable of at that time, energy level wise. It was so bad that I would be on the couch and I didn't have the energy to get up, go to the kitchen and put food in the pan to just cook it that I already had in the fridge. That's how exhausted I was, that I couldn't even do that. And so I was just ordering from Uber Eats every single day, being like, I can't live like this. This is so fucked up. Like unable to take meetings, unable to take phone calls, just kind of lying there, unable to really even go outside, right? And forcing myself to go outside to get sunlight and try and move my body. But it was really bad. And then there were really harsh emotional side effects to this as well. So obviously, when you're stagnant like that and you are declining in such a rapid and scary way, that also takes a huge toll on mental health. And so for me, I had numerous things that were going on. One was I had the desire to create and produce, and that was on pause because I couldn't do that. So that was really painful for me. The other thing that was really plaguing my mind was finances. So obviously, taking a break from work for several weeks or months is going to have a financial impact on you if you're a normal person and not inherently crazily privileged and rich. So I had a really big commitment because I am currently developing a real estate project in Bali, and I had committed to developing this thing. So I have this contract for builders. I have 30 builders on site building these houses, and I'm paying for all of this through my business. And so if I stop working and I'm not marketing and I'm not delivering, then what am I going to do? And so I have this freak out where I'm like, oh my God, am I going to be able to make the payments for this project that I am committed to? What's the worst case scenario? What's going to happen? What am I going to do? And I start freaking out and spiraling so bad. And also, living in LA is also reasonably expensive as well. Like it's not the cheapest place in the world to live. And so I'm sitting there. I remember at one point I had such a bad mental breakdown thinking about how I wasn't creating, thinking about how life felt so meaningless and purposeless, that I felt so stuck and stagnant. And I was just really deep in fear around money of, I can't afford to live. What am I going to do about this thing that I committed to? Like if I can't afford to finish building these things, I'm just going to have this half finished thing and then all of my money will be gone and I have no one to look after me. And so for context, my family situation is that I don't have a relationship with my birth father. I don't have any siblings. I have my mum. My mum lives in Melbourne, Australia. My mum is an immigrant, very lower socioeconomic background. Like she grew up crazy poor, abject poverty. When I'm talking about my mum, her family in China shared a house with two other families. There was one bathroom for three families, and I visited that house probably 3 or 4 times growing up, went to China and saw where they lived, how they lived, where they grew up. Imagine sharing a bathroom with 2 other families. Like that's the level of what we're talking about. And my mum would regularly tell me these stories about how for her birthday, her present was a boiled egg. Like an egg was a treat that she would look forward to all year. That is the level of poverty that we're talking about. That is ingrained in my lineage. And obviously, when you grow up with those kinds of conditions, you are going to have a certain mindset when it comes to money. And so as I mentioned in my origin story episodes, my mum's view on money and abundance is built on that level of poverty that she grew up in, right? And so being around her is very challenging for me for a multitude of reasons, but primarily my ambition to create and do things that are completely unimaginable to her and to my family and where they've come from. I don't have the level of emotional support or encouragement of I believe in you and that's great and you can do this. What I have is a lot of rubbing up against the grain and a lot of talk or a lot of rhetoric that says you shouldn't do that. That's really risky. That's really dangerous. And my mom will regularly project that she doesn't feel safe, and she'll just say that's not safe and you shouldn't do that and that's not possible and you need to just keep your head down and work hard and try to not, piss anyone off or don't be noticed too much, be humble, and you really shouldn't take any risks in life whatsoever. So everything that I've done up until now and will continue to do is something that is not supported by my mum's psychological beliefs. And so you can understand why I had to get as far away from Australia as possible to create an environment where doing what I wanted to do would be supported and where I could normalize it and thrive. Now, back to the poverty. So I am a very independent woman. I have created everything that I've done myself without the financial support or the emotional support of a family or a partner. In fact, I have rebuilt from not only scratch, but from losing everything. So I've built what I have in spite of certain setbacks and circumstances by myself. And when I get into a mindset where things feel unstable, like they did when I was very sick living in that house with mold, I can go into this like state of panic where I'm like, oh my God, there's no one to look after me. I'm fucked. Like, I don't have a family. I don't have a partner. I'm all alone. This is bad. This is bad. Like, if I can't provide for me, no one will provide for me. I'm going to die. And I can just start to think that I'm going to die and panic really badly. And so that will rarely happen. Obviously, those conditions were extreme in a house with toxic mold and my health is declining. So obviously, my mental health was just kind of spiraling. Lucky for me, I do have really great friends, and that's one of the incredible things that I've been able to cultivate over the last couple of years in my entrepreneurial and self-development journey is an incredible community of people that do feel like family that I can turn to in those times and lean on for emotional support, for connection, for love, for physical connection and intimacy, and to also just feel held. So my closest friends all said, mate, you are fine. Like, I will take care of you. You'll come to my house and you'll live with me and don't worry. Like, you've got a home. Like, it's all going to be okay. And at least 4 different people said, don't worry. Like, I will not let you fall into chaos and I will not let you suffer and die. Like, you know, get you on a plane and get you to me and I'll take care of you kind of thing. And that was really the saving grace in those moments where I was very fragile. So shout out to the friends that feel like family, and cultivating those friendships. It's very important for mental health. And we are an animal at the end of the day, humans, you know, we're designed to live in communities. And so connection is one of the things that really saves us. I read something the other day about how loneliness actually decreases your lifespan more than any other disease, which is really interesting. I think it was in a research that Brené Brown referenced. More than physical diseases that might increase your chance of early onset by 5%. You know, loneliness is 45, so that's wild. As this is all unfolding, I am sharing a little bit about this on my social media, and one of my good friends, Zoe, who I lived with in Bali, was in Costa Rica. Now, Zoe works with Kambo. So if you are unfamiliar with Kambo, Kambo is the secretion of an Amazonian tree frog, and it produces that secretion when it's being hunted to ward off predators. Now, this is not to be confused with bufo, or also known as 5-MeO-DMT. So bufo alveolus is a psychedelic that is used to essentially have like a very similar experience to ayahuasca, like DMT. So bufo is a really intense psychedelic used for a different set of reasons. Kambo is actually a very powerful natural peptide. So it's not really a psychedelic as it is a peptide. It is a very strong natural detoxifier that works through the lymphatic system of the body. And so when you are taking Kambo, you are essentially eliminating toxins from the body. It's not a psychedelic internal mental experience. It's more of a physical purge because of the way that it's flushing things out and bringing things to the surface. And so you might purge through vomiting or through diarrhea, maybe both, maybe one or the other, but you will purge to eliminate those toxins from the body when you have the Kambo. So I had done Kambo once before in a ceremony, and my intention that first time was emotional healing. This time it was purely physical, right? I was like, get the mold out of my body. So when you live in a house with toxic mold, essentially what happens is that mold will emit spores in the form of mycotoxins, and those mycotoxins will be absorbed by your body through the skin, through the respiratory system mainly. So you're breathing it in, and these are very tiny pathogens. Now, mycotoxins are, as the name suggests, toxins. They're toxic for the system. So Zoe messages me and says, Phoebes, why don't you do Kambo to cleanse out and detox the mycotoxins from your body? And I thought, that makes so much sense. What a great idea. Let's do Kambo. So we organize that. Zoe flies to LA from Costa Rica. She brings the Kambo with her, and my roommate and myself do a specialized protocol for all of the mycotoxin fleshing out. Now, because I had done Kambo once before, I could do this advanced protocol where she was applying the secretion on very specific parts of my body to target very specific detox pathways. So we did 3 Kambo ceremonies in a period of 4 days, which is very intense. We applied the dots. So the way that it works, if you've never done it before, is you burn the top layer of the skin. Once you burn that top layer of the skin, you clean it, sterilize it, wipe it off, and then you apply the secretion to those points in the skin for it to enter the body through the bloodstream. So it's not something that you take orally. It's going directly in through the lymphatic system. So we had entry points or gates applied to my ears for my brain fog, my mental clarity, my fatigue. We had entry points applied to my stomach for my gastrointestinal issues. And then we had entry points applied to my back for just the ability to move forward, create, produce in life. Because you have a central meridian, and then you have governing meridians that go through your front and back all along your spine from the front and the back. So those were the 3 areas that we targeted for me. And I did a mycotoxin test. I would strongly suggest that if you are someone that has had exposure to mold, that you also do a mycotoxin test. Now, most of the time, this is not something that can be done alone. You need to order it through a healthcare provider, like a nutritionist, functional medicine doctor, something like that. It's also kind of hard to read, and I wouldn't suggest that you read it on your own because you probably won't know what you're looking at. You will want someone to interpret that for you. So if you just Google mycotoxin test, and again, just your location where you live, or take test or get test near me, it'll probably redirect you to a provider, a doctor near you that can order it for you and so on. So in California, you can't order it yourself. You need a provider. Some states, you can order it yourself. And obviously that will probably change country to country as well. I ordered the test through a naturopath, did the test, and I think I came up positive for 6 or 7 different mycotoxins. So we knew that, I had mold exposure. This was definitely the case. It was in my system. After we did the 3 rounds of Kambo in 4 days, I did a second mycotoxin test on the last day, right after the 3rd protocol. I did the test on the last day, right after the 3rd session. And it does typically take about a week for those results to completely come through, meaning that Kambo will still be working and eliminating things from your bloodstream, from your system, and that detoxification process will continue to go, but it is quite rapid. So I didn't want to wait. I didn't also have the opportunity of waiting because I had a flight that I needed to catch. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to take that second test now to see how we went. And the Kambo effectively eliminated somewhere between 70 to 80% of the mycotoxins from my system in those 4 days. One of the mycotoxins was 100% eliminated, which is really wild. So for the most part, it worked. And I thought, wow, that is brilliant. I don't know if anyone has really tested Kambo as a solution for mold poisoning before. All while this is happening, I decided that this would make a great documentary. So I called a friend of mine who I had met a couple months prior, and this is a separate story, which is so brilliant, which I hope to tell you another time, who is a producer that lives between New York and Berlin. She's been producing for probably over 20 years. I think maybe 25 years. And I asked her if she could produce this documentary with me. And at this point in time, when I asked, it was before I had the results, and I didn't know if it was going to work. I just thought, I think this is really interesting. I think this could potentially really help a lot of people. I found out that mold affects 45 million Americans a year, which is a lot. That's more than the population of Australia, where I'm from. And I know that it's also a really big issue in a lot of other countries. So I'm thinking people are probably not even really associating their symptomology of fatigue with the fact that they might have a toxic environment that they're living in and breathing in all the time. And I knew from having watched a video of Brian Johnson, who cops a lot of heat. If you don't know who Brian Johnson is, he's that billionaire that spends $2 million a year on testing health protocols. So some people think he's amazing. A lot of people think he's just like this white man that spends a lot of money and is super privileged and crazy. I think a bit of both. So a colleague of mine interviewed him on a YouTube video and asked him, okay, with all of this money that you've spent on testing all of these crazy protocols and building this technology that apparently can tell you how to take care of yourself better than you can, what have you learned? What are the big takeaways after all of these millions of dollars of biohacking, testing, science experiments? Surely you've learned something that we don't know. And the 4 takeaways were just basic things that we all already know. Number 1 was removing toxins as much as possible. We are exposed to something like 132 different toxins a day, and that can be anything from toxins in the air, in our houses, to what we're ingesting through food, beauty products, car fumes, anything, right? It's absolutely everywhere. But some of the things that you can do immediately that you do have control over is be more mindful over the food that you're consuming. Try and eliminating those processed foods, packaged foods, where there are additives and things that you don't know. Thinking about even receipts, there are a lot of toxins in receipts. And so just not touching receipts and saying you don't need a receipt, getting a receipt emailed to you instead. Beauty products is a really big one. Makeup, cleansers, shampoos. There is an app called Yuka that you can download that will scan products and give you a score out of 100 that will tell you how clean those products are for consumption. So I highly recommend that app. And of course, mold, mycotoxins, mercury, lead. You want to be really mindful of those things in water, making sure that you are, if you have access to spring water, that's going to be the absolute best thing for you. But if you don't have access to spring water, if that's not something that's financially viable for you, then filtering water from the tap and making sure that you are getting out any of that sediment, any of the additives that have been added to tap water. Number 2, and the rest of these things are really just obvious. Number 2 is sleeping well, because obviously the restorative power of sleep is really important. Number 3 was nutrition, so your diet, making sure that you're eating well, eating clean, nutrient-dense foods. And number 4 was exercise. So millions and millions of dollars spent, and these are things that for the most part, we're already aware of that we can kind of do right now. So when I realized how many people this was affecting, I thought, okay, this is going to be really valuable, because doing Kambo is relatively financially affordable. It's not a crazy expensive thing. It is a natural occurring substance. So we decided to film the entire experience as an experiment. And we organized a film crew in about 3 weeks. And that is going to be a pilot episode for a docuseries that I am producing called The Healing Experiment. So stay tuned for that first episode where you can get all of the information in a lot more depth. I was thrilled, as you can imagine, getting the results back from those mycotoxin tests. I immediately felt a massive difference after the Kambo. I felt like my brain was so much clearer. I was more energized. The bloating had subsided. I felt like I got my life back again. The first thing that I noticed that was the most important thing though was that my mood had elevated because I was in such a dark place throughout that period of time that I started to feel energized and happy again. Like I could do things again. And I was like, oh my God, okay, I can start producing and creating and moving forward again. This is great. I have energy back. I have life force. And I thought, this is great. You know, I feel good. I have energy. The tests are validating that I'm feeling great because we've managed to effectively eliminate 70 to 80% of this toxic crap that was in my body. So I've removed myself from the environment. I'm no longer living in that house. And I now get to proceed and pick up where I left off with this book project, and I can write it in the next 90 days. Okay, minor setback, but we're back on track. So I get on a plane to New Zealand to go and visit one of my best friends and live with her for a couple of weeks. And I'm feeling great for a little while and making progress on my book. And everything is fine. Or so I thought. We're going to end today's episode here with a cliffhanger, and we're going to pick up next week with the rest of what happens next, because things were not fine as I thought. We need to unravel and go a lot deeper and realize that the problem is in fact not mold, that it runs a lot deeper, both from a symptomology standpoint and also from a root cause standpoint. And if you are testing for mold, you are going to need to go even deeper. So I'll see you next week.